if you were to take the music of John Williams and hear dun 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 dun, dun, would you know that's about Indiana Jones? You know what I'm saying? When you hear Darth Vader's theme, do you know that that's from a galaxy far, far away? If you're able to remove everything that has to do with the music and just hear the score, can you tell the story? My name is Anthony Espina. I'm a film composer. I'm 34 now, so I've been doing it pretty much 17 years. Well, I was very musically inclined. I came from a family that loved music. My mother was a pianist. She used to play Nadia's theme, Green Sleeves. She even played a beautiful rendition of Nino Rota's The Godfather's theme. And she would play Beethoven's For Elise, Moonlight Sonata. So I grew up with these very melodic piano pieces, and that was really my first inspiration to music. When I was 12 years old, I started picking up the piano, kind of following my mother's footsteps, and kind of teach myself a way around the piano, kind of come up with these little concert pieces, and I just grew from there. But shortly after that, I saw a film called The Last of the Mohicans. It's a Michael Mann film, and Trevor Jones was the composer. And I absolutely fell in love with that movie. I fell in love with that score. And that was it for me. I was like, that's what I want to do. And it just fell in my lap at 7. When I turned 17, I was about to graduate high school. And I got an opportunity to write the score for a student film that actually ended up later being bigger than she even thought, because she actually got the opportunity. She found funding. And her original script changed into actually a short film to a feature. I was like, okay, this is going bigger than what I thought it was going to be. And then you're in the theater and you're watching and hearing your music, and then you see your name, music by Anthony Espina. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to feel that every single time. You gotta, as a composer, you gotta be able to improvise. And what I'm not necessarily improvise with music, but improvise with change in direction. I've had so many directors come to me and say, this is what I want. And midway through, after loving everything that's been done, they're like, I'm not really liking the way this is going. Can we make things techno now? So we've gone from jazz to techno, and now he wants a rock score or a rock opera. You never really know what's going to happen midway through, and as a composer, you have to be able to adapt. What I like to do is I like to break it down to make it as easy as possible. I start with one note or one sound. If I can break it down to making it as easy as possible, I know it can only grow from there. So I'll go back to the example of the giant Pacific octopus. At that moment, I was going through so much with the passing of my mom that I was dealing with this roller coaster of emotions and grief, and I didn't really know how I was going to be able to approach the score, which thankfully is you can actually see it on Tubi TV, the streaming platform. The documentary is on Tubi TV, so make sure to check it out. But at this point, I didn't really know how I was going to approach it. What do I do? How do I tell a story about an octopus? And that's when I came across the instrument that was called the waterphone, and that's when I realized that that's how it started. That sound right there, I was like, okay, at least I'm in the water now, And once I'm in the water, that's when I always turn to the piano. And like I said, I always start with one note. I go from here, and I work my way up. Something's gonna hit me. I don't know what it is and when it is, and usually, I'll land on a certain note, and then that's when I know, So right there is when it starts. Once you're able to build off that one note, and the most satisfying thing as a film composer is when you do hit it, you'll know. You feel it, and it's like, this is it. And there's no greater feeling as a film composer. It's like when you know that you've done something that's going to help tell this story. It really is. From that point on till I finish the score, it's a one-way street. I find God in every single project that I work on. It's a very unique thing because, again, how do you find God in a horror film? But it's, like I said, finding the gaps within a story that might have hidden meaning. And a lot of film, I've worked on a lot of films that I see the meaning that they're trying to portray in a certain scene or in a certain, emotional dilemma that the character's going through. And I know, for example, a character might be struggling to live. They might not want to live anymore. They might want to take their own life. There's God in that. There's Jesus in that. That person needs faith in their life. And if it's something that the director wants to portray, which almost all the time, either you're going down or you're going up. It's called American Trash, and it's actually the film that I'm working on now. And it's about a person that's suffering through PTSD. And anybody that's, served in our military and has had to come back to just trying to live a normal life, you can't expect that to happen. And this movie really puts that on full bloom for people who suffer from PTSD. But I've been really experimenting with different sounds more so than I've ever done, because I want to try to incorporate kind of what people go through when they're dealing with that. Obviously, I wouldn't know, but I can assume for anybody I've seen violent things like that, like being in war and stuff like that. It's something that never leaves you. You never escape it. So I wanted something that was going to linger in people's minds as far as sound is concerned. I've been trying to experiment with banjos a lot. I think it's an instrument that's not really used, and it's really kind of like pigeon-held to when you hear a banjo, you think old traditional American, right? Well, the movie's called American Trash, so I wanted definitely American instrumentation, but I want to play around with that instrument. I want to try to take it to its ultimate edge, almost like even sometimes in these more violent parts, actually destroy the instrument and see what it sounds like when you destroy it. What does it sound like when you throw a banjo to the floor and break it? Can I use that sound? Can I manipulate that? Again, it's PTSD. PTSD, people can explode at any given moment. They can't even have somebody come up from behind themselves. They look to see what's going on. So I want to kind of try to use American instrumentation to try to implement that in dark and extreme ways. Everything that I've gone through in my life, I've been able to express musically. And it's sometimes as a composer, I call it the toolbox. Sometimes you got to relive a certain emotion to be able to help portray a certain level of power in your music to help tell a story. And I've had to relive some difficult moments. Of course, I had that cancer scare when I was a kid. I've had to relive that a couple of times, especially when I was writing the music to My Kid It's Not Crazy, how I felt as a teenager with an illness. I was 15 years old when I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed with bladder cancer. And when you hear cancer, I remember being in the room and the doctor just, I was actually just me and the doctor. There was no family around, and the doctor just came out and he said, you have a tumor. You have a tumor in your bladder. And, at the time, when you say tumor, you're like, oh God, is it cancerous or is it not? Like, you're right there. I was a 15-year-old kid. The first thing you think is, I'm going to die. It was a very surreal moment. But at the same time, I realize now why I had to go through it. And with the pain and the suffering and the torment and the hate and the anger and the confusion of being a 15-year-old diagnosed with bladder cancer, I found my true calling, my true purpose. And in the midst of all of that nightmare and that darkness, music was always there. It was the seed. And I had been watering it. I had been taking care of it. It was something that always brought joy to my life. But now that I was going through what I was going through, I could no longer play sports. I could no longer, I'm here having to be in pain, in treatment. The piano was right there just staring at me. And so that's why I know, like, okay, God, I see what you're doing. You gave this to me. I got to go through it. But he saw me through the other side. It's definitely made me a better person. It's made me a better composer. It's helped me realize how important my faith is, because we're going to be tested in this life. We always are. No matter how great life is going, everybody's tested one way or another. It's how attuned you are to that love of Christ, to that power of faith, and how committed you are to it that's going to help you keep going. The key ingredient to all of it is perseverance. There's a good little saying here to where this too shall pass. You could be going through the most darkest moments of your life. That'll pass. You could be going through something incredibly great, loving, and beautiful. That's going to change as well. Nothing stays the same. We're constantly involved. We're constantly transitioning. We're constantly changing. But what doesn't change is your faith. That stays the same. No matter what you're going through, remember why you started. Remember why you began. Because that's what's going to propel you to keep going.